Hello, lovely, and welcome or welcome back. I want to share with you this exercise that I did with a client, which is pretty typical of the rest of my clients. I always do this exercise. So I would recommend you get a pen and paper or get your calculator out. Because what I'm going to do is share with you some ideas about the kind of money that you're spending on alcohol, and some of which are hidden costs that I think you're perhaps not aware of or you're not conscious of. And you've certainly probably never listed it out and thought about how much it might be. So, one of the reasons I do this with my clients before I get into it is because there's often with my clients there's this sort of initial feeling of wanting to do more in life and wanting to have better holidays or pay off the mortgage, or you know doing things, not having a car loan and paying that off, or just having a better standard of living. And as soon as they mention money, I do this exercise. So I'm going to give you an example, of what one of my clients shared with me, so you can go through it as we go through it together. So my first question is, how much do you spend on alcohol? This client, this lady, was spending average of about £7 a bottle of wine, 7 nights a week. Now, I know for some of you, seven might be too expensive, might not be expensive enough, but that was what she was spending, and she was having a bottle of wine every day. And sometimes she wouldn't, and sometimes she'd buy a more expensive bottle. So that would come out to roughly the same amount every week, which was about 28 to £30 a week. Then we added on the snacks that often go with drinking. Mine was crisps. I've got a very salty tooth, and you give me a big bag of crisps, and I can stick my head inside them, and I'm away. But you will often get, like extra ones in because you're drinking. It's kind of, you've got no control anymore. So that can be, you'll probably end up buying more. And then there'll be other things as well. And she was spending something like £30 a week on various snacks and bits and pieces like nuts and stuff like that, that she wouldn't normally have bought if she hadn't been drinking. The next thing was taxis, because obviously you can't drive when you're drinking, and she didn't. So the times when she went out was about £20 a week on taxis. Um, so that, and it was maybe not as regular as that, but it worked out on average of about £20 a week. And then, and this I call them the bread and milk run, because I don't know, that I used to do this all the time, and it it it's embarrassing to say it now, but I would pop to the shop for bread and milk, so that I could buy wine, but I would kind of, in my guilt and shame, buy something normal to prove that I hadn't come to the shop just for wine, which is just so stupid, because I'm sure nobody in the store cares, but you still do it anyway. And nearly every woman I've ever worked with has said the same thing. So that would put an extra £10 a week, because you'd buy something like a punnet of strawberries or milk or bread or whatever. Um, then there are the one-eyed scrolling purchases on your phone, and a lot of this particular client used to buy a lot of makeup to make it look, to make her look good, because, she knew she didn't. Um, and she would be spending something like £30 a week on average on scrolly purchases, maybe a top or some more makeup and things like that. I certainly did that. I was constantly trying to make myself feel better. I was, and I used to be obsessed with getting the very best under eye concealer that I could get my hands on, because my under eyes are very dark, and I thought it was to do with alcohol. And I've been sober since 2017 and I still have them. So it's got nothing to do with that. But so I still have a little bit of an obsession with concealer. But when you get into that habit, especially when you had a drink and you think, "Oh, I'll try that," then there was £30 a week being spent on that. Very often, and I used to do this a lot, would be spending money on takeaways, and she was doing the same thing. So it would be, stopping on the way home and picking up something like fish and chips, or Chinese takeaway or an Indian takeaway or something like that, or worse, having them delivered, which would just cost even more because you couldn't be bothered to cook, because you felt like you were just too tired all the time. And it's amazing how your mind will tell you these stories, to give you that sort of idea that you need this treat. It's just a treat, but it isn't a treat. It's something that you do regularly, and it would often, turn into £40 a week, because she wasn't just buying for herself. So that, when you add all of those things up, and I don't do it lightly, but I think we don't realize how much of our um, spending is associated on the outside of alcohol. Um, so we added all of that up, um, and it came. And when I told her the amount, which was £8,216 in the year, I always get the same reaction, which is often shock. And my estimation is it's usually a bit more than that, because you maybe drink a bit more at different times. You may do more shopping runs, because one of the things that happens as well is when you do the bread and milk run, it's because you didn't want to put 7 bottles in the trolley. So you have to do the bread and milk run to get more alcohol. And I'm not laughing, because I mean, I've done it, I've been there. And when I look back on it now, it seems utterly ridiculous, but it's real and it happens. And I said to her, what would you do with an extra £8,000 a year? And she was sort of like, "Well, God, loads." And I said, "Well, that's how much you're spending on alcohol and its related kind of purchases." And it's shocking. And I think those amounts are pretty conservative. If you're in a family, takeaways are going to be much more expensive. Snacks that you can't just buy for yourself, it'll have to be for everybody. So we have, we think sometimes that, it'll be great to give up alcohol because it'll save me money. And of course it will. And the thing that the reason I wanted to share this with you, and the real reason I wanted to share this with you, is that I want to ask you, what are your dreams? Could you change your life in some way? Probably quite dramatically, by having that kind of money in your life. An extra £10,000 a year. I did this exercise with another client who was very generous when she went out drinking, and it came to £20,000, which is what she needed to start a new business. Sometimes we need to do this very simple activity to make it real for us. So at the turn of the year, I think this is quite a good exercise to do, to see how much you're spending on alcohol. So, or at any time. So tell me down below, how much have you been spending on alcohol? And what would you do with the money if it was all in your bank? One of the things that I know about my money situation is. I've been on my own for a long time, so I'm responsible 100% for my finances, and not drinking has freed me massively to not be worried about money. I'd never need to check my bank account anymore. There is always enough money in, and I'm never scraping at the end of the month because I've spent so much money on all of those things. And that's just taken one massive stress away from me. So I'd be interested to know, if you don't want to do it in the video, drop me an email and let me know what you think and what that amount is for you. And the other thing to say is, if you think you can't afford coaching, do this exercise, because you definitely can. All my love, and I will see you soon. Take care.